Good evening, everyone. We're going to get started. I'm Isaac Jabola Karolis, and I work as a fellow in the SLU Writing Center as part of CUNY's Writing Across the Curriculum program. I'm pursuing my PhD in sociology at the CUNY Graduate Center, and along the way, I've taught writing-intensive courses in sociology at Lehman College. I'm excited to introduce today's training, Building Successful Writing Assignments, a webinar for SLU faculty. As the spring semester draws to a close, we wanted to offer you a way to reflect on your current approach to writing assignments and to invite you to consider experimenting with new tools in your summer or fall courses. We know your time is precious, so we'll keep this webinar relatively short, but I'm more than happy to keep the conversation going in the coming weeks. My role is to support you in weaving writing instruction best practices into your courses, so please do reach out at any time. So while we were waiting to begin, I asked you to reflect on the challenges that your students have encountered in recent major writing assignments that you've used in your courses. And some common challenges include the fact that submissions weren't as strong as you'd hoped they would be, or that students struggled to focus on or fully address the assignment prompt. Other issues include writing mechanics and organization, some occasional plagiarism, or simply the fact that students struggle to turn in assignments on time or at all. The premise of this webinar is that assignment design, specifically we'll focus on sequencing and scaffolding, can help you address many of these challenges. How we design our assignments can significantly affect student outcomes. I'd like to start by clarifying how we use the terms sequencing and scaffolding in the Writing Center. Often the two terms are used interchangeably, but we find it useful to try to distinguish between the two. By sequencing, we mean creating a series of assignments or assignment steps that build on one another, moving from simple tasks to more complex tasks. You can incorporate sequencing within a single assignment, or you can sequence across assignments, allowing students to repeat skills and to hone new ones as you move from one assignment to the next. So for instance, initial steps in a sequence might exercise students' skills in comprehending and summarizing readings. Then later steps might involve more complex skills, such as evaluating a reading or synthesizing multiple readings. Scaffolding, one of my least favorite aspects of urban life, but one of my preferred tools in the classroom. By scaffolding, we mean breaking up an assignment into smaller tasks that add up to a whole. Here's one way to visualize these distinctions. This table outlines the differences between scaffolding and the two types of sequencing. To repeat, when sequencing within an assignment, you move students from simple to complex tasks. Sequencing across assignments follows a similar logic. In each sequential assignment, students repeat skills and cultivate new ones. Scaffolding an assignment, again, involves breaking up an assignment into smaller tasks that add up to a whole. If you confuse these terms going forward, or you just use these terms differently, don't worry. What matters is that you do them, not so much what you call them. The reason that we want to share these tools with you is because there are several benefits to using scaffolding and sequencing. For students, first of all, sequencing facilitates development of student writing and cognitive skills by moving students toward more complex tasks and providing them opportunities for practice and reflection and revision. Second, both sequencing and scaffolding can help students better manage their time. Always helpful. Students are forced to move away from the model of last-minute panic writing. As a result, and this is a third benefit, both sequencing and scaffolding also help students produce higher quality work and avoid resorting to desperate measures like plagiarism. These methods really provide students structure and space to learn. For you as teachers, sequencing and scaffolding can lead to more efficient and effective use of commenting and grading time. Efficient because you can catch issues early on before they get bigger, and effective because students can learn from your comments and implement your suggestions along the way. So they actually do or have the chance to do something with the input that you provide. Let's zoom out for a moment. Sequencing and scaffolding are just two approaches that can improve student writing outcomes. They represent a subset of assignment design strategies. Other best practices include low-stakes writing and informal writing, individualized support, and effective commenting strategies on the part of instructors. However, sequencing and scaffolding are not only a matter of assignment design. They're such powerful tools because they can leverage all of these best practices for improving student writing outcomes. And the following examples show how. And please excuse the title of this slide, which has been cut off for some reason. First, let's look at an example of sequencing within an assignment. Let's imagine that the final assignment product is a standard research paper. A most basic sequence would have students submit a proposal earlier in the semester, then a final draft at the end. A more developed sequence could have students move from a relatively simple task, like outlining their paper, to more complex tasks, like a first draft and then a final draft. An even more developed sequence could have students produce short, informal summaries of the readings or sources they consult in their research. You could also ask students to create a reverse outline of a model paper to help them understand what makes an effective paper. Finally, if you have a small class, you might also be able to build in one-on-one meetings with students. If you have a larger course, you could run an in-class peer review session in which students review and provide structured feedback on each other's drafts. Now let's turn to scaffolding. Let's turn to sequencing across assignments. Let's look at this example. You might begin by having your students produce short summaries of a reading or readings. Then you might assign a short analytical essay of a work or works by a single author. In part of that essay, they would apply the skill of summarizing, which they would have been practicing previously. But the assignment would also call on students to move to the more complex skill of analysis, pivoting from summary toward interpretation, evaluation, or argumentation. An even more complex analytical assignment could follow, in which students would be required to compare works by multiple authors. Now, scaffolding. Let's say that you've assigned students a final paper that takes the form of a literature review, or perhaps a research paper that can take the form of a literature review. You could scaffold the assignment by breaking the assignment down into chunks. Students could submit a review of different research clusters as the semester progresses. Then they would synthesize the 3 or however many clusters toward the end of the semester. Another good example of scaffolding comes from the capstone courses, in which students are often required to work on and submit drafts of capstone paper sections over the course of the semester. I now want to introduce a special category of steps that can be inserted into assignment sequences, and that is steps that can promote students' metacognition. Metacognition refers to the act of reflecting on or being aware of your own cognitive processes. In other words, thinking about how you're thinking. Research shows that student outcomes, like reading and writing skills, do improve when students practice metacognition. The good news is that tasks that boost metacognition can be easily incorporated into assignment sequences. For example, pre-writes ask students to digest an assignment prompt or guidelines to identify any points of confusion, uncertainty, or concern. to identify what they will need to do to begin the assignment, or to identify what knowledge or skills they already have and what new knowledge or skills they will need to acquire to complete the assignment. Author's notes are short reflections that students submit with their assignment drafts. The purpose of these notes is for students to express things like, here's what I've tried so far, here's what I think is working well, here's what I'm struggling with and could use help with. Revision plans are a third tool. They require students to articulate how they will approach the revision process based on feedback from you or from their classmates. Students in this approach develop a to-do list for revising and strengthening the substance of their written assignment. The focus here is on big picture issues like organization, argumentation, use of evidence, and not on minor editing or proofreading or correction tasks. For the purpose of illustration, let's imagine you could do a maximally sequenced assignment with steps that look like this. In bold are moments where you could insert metacognitive tools, a pre-write as the first step, an author's note with the first draft, a revision plan after students receive feedback on their drafts, and a reflective author's note or post-write with the final draft. Now let's talk about the issues that can arise in putting sequencing and scaffolding into practice. If you've ever tried these approaches before, you'll know that they are not immune to challenges. Time, as always, can be a major concern or obstacle. If you have students submit drafts or elements of a final assignment, then you will be reviewing their work multiple times instead of just at the end of the semester. However, sequencing and scaffolding, by providing opportunities for course correction, can help you prevent time-intensive issues with student work down the line. Furthermore, you don't have to grade or provide highly detailed feedback on intermediate assignment steps. In fact, when sequencing within an assignment or scaffolding, it's often more appropriate not to grade preliminary steps or metacognitive steps. And when providing feedback, a few short, big picture comments are often more effective than numerous detailed comments. You can see our Writing Center video on effective commenting for more on this point. So sequencing and scaffolding require some additional work upfront in building your assignments, but they don't necessarily require of you any major investment of additional time during the semester. And in some cases, they can save you some time. If you haven't used sequencing or scaffolding in the past, what I'd suggest is that you start by trying a modest assignment sequence or scaffold design in your next course. You don't need to do the full 9-step model that I showed previously. I know that's quite intimidating. So you could start with 2 or 3 or 4 steps and see how it goes, then build from there the next time around. A second challenge is that you'll likely have students who don't implement your feedback, which can be frustrating to you as an instructor. No doubt not all students will take advantage of the learning and time management opportunities afforded by sequencing and scaffolding. But many students will, and that's valuable, that's the point. For students who don't implement feedback you give them on drafts, for instance, or who don't engage the revision process seriously, at very least, you'll have a clear basis for grading their final work than you would otherwise. And the student will also have a better understanding of the final assignment grade or grades that they receive. Finally, you'll almost always have students who fall behind if you scaffold or sequence within an assignment. Having more assignment parts means more deadlines that might be missed. But the silver lining here is that sequencing and scaffolding allow you to identify relatively early in the semester the students that are struggling and need more support, whether from you or from the Writing Center or their academic advisor or counseling services. Before we wrap up, I want to give you a moment to think about how you could apply sequencing and scaffolding in your teaching. So the question I pose to you is, how could you use sequencing or scaffolding to redesign assignments in one of your courses? Feel free to think about one specific assignment or sequencing across assignments. You can find more tips and tools on assignment design and scaffolding and sequencing specifically at these links. The first is a link to the University of Michigan Writing Center site, which addresses the strategies I presented here in greater depth and with examples. The slide earlier that noted templates were available. Those templates are linked to in this University of Michigan webpage. The second resource here is a short tip sheet on our Writing Center website, which includes some of the approaches I've shared, plus others. We'll send out these links in an email after this webinar. And for those of you watching the recording, we'll include the links below the video. Well, that concludes the material that I had planned for this session. I hope that you found the presentation helpful, and I wish you luck with the remainder of the semester. So thank you very much, and I hope to be in touch soon. Good night.